Alright, so jumping into it, I don't need to give the whole spiel about what the Monsterverse is. You already know, but if for some reason you really don't, then I'd recommend watching out my first few videos in the franchise. Anyway, the lore of the Monsterverse past isn't what this video is about. Nah. This is about the future. That is 100% guaranteed, as I've foreseen it in my crystal ball that I definitely own. And already, the results of my bold predictions are beginning to bear fruit. Monarch has indeed been renewed for a second season, along with other spin-offs, which, I didn't talk about, but don't worry guys, I foresaw it, and while Wingard is no longer involved in the next film, it does appear to still be another Godzilla x Kong movie. Although, if I'm being entirely truthful, I'm actually more partial towards a Godzilla 3 next, but hey, technically my last video hasn't been disproven entirely yet. So, make your bets now for how long that'll last. Anywho, to give a brief recap of everything I did last time, in case you have forgotten or just want to jump into this video without the context, I predicted we would be seeing Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, Season 2. I'm going to be giving all these guys a date, generally what I think is most realistic. 2025 feels realistic, given the 2-year production cycle per season, which is becoming a commonality amongst big streaming shows like this. Godzilla x Kong, The Destroyer Dynasty. Of course, this was based on what Wingard had been talking about before he left the project, but who knows what might realistically take its place now. I feel 2026 is probably the earliest we'll see whatever this does turn out to be, though. And if I'm being entirely honest, okay, yeah, they probably aren't doing Destroyer, fine, but, they haven't confirmed they're not, so again, my old video still bears fruit! Godzilla, Dawn of Gigan. This is where we get into the real speculation. The other two were simple enough to guess with context clues at that time, which of course comes down to the fact that the big lizard makes money, but from here it's largely speculation mixed with pure copium. My favorite kind of coping. Kong Hollow Earth. Big Monkey finally gets a sequel. Yeah. And then the big 2-part finale, Godzilla x Kong Destroy All Monsters, and Final Wars. And then the big 2-part finale to our mock Phase 2. Bringing the Exilians, they turn all monsters on Earth evil, except Godzilla and Kong, and the two will have to either kill or free all the monsters they can in order to stick it to the final boss, Kaiser Ghidorah, and Ultra Gigan. This would have been set up throughout every prior project, with normal Gigan appearing first in Godzilla 3, and us seeing Ghidorah again in Monarch Season 2, which is set during the events of King of the Monsters, and sets the foundation for his return. After that climactic conclusion, we see Kong and Godzilla returning to their separate parts of the world, Kong returns to Hollow Earth, and Godzilla remaining the Alpha, up on the surface. Clearly not to be challenged by any other monster after this film. Well, except for one. You see, there's one monster that never learns, one that never takes the time to think about their failures and always tries again, only ever leading to the worst possible outcome. That monster, of course, is the human being. Which brings us into Phase 3. You ready for this? 2034. Monarch G-Team, Season 1. Releasing 2 years after the finale to the Exilian arc, as I am dubbing it, a brand new sequel series to Monarch Legacy of Monsters will begin, this time dubbed G-Team. In the wake of the chaos caused over the recent years by monster-related destruction, Monarch has put more focus into its military division, which was first seen in Godzilla King of the Monsters back in 2019, the G-Team. We bring over some characters from Legacy of Monsters, really any who have survived, but this isn't exactly their forte. This isn't a team for studying monsters, it's a team for finding a way to combat them. The show would follow a similar format to Legacy of Monsters, 10 episodes, each building up with a larger plot, while also making sure each episode has its own distinction to separate itself from others while aiding the week-by-week release. But, due to its more action-oriented approach, we see more monsters established throughout the Monsterverse. A few original titans and one big guy who starts making a ruckus, Anguirus. An evolved titan form of the spiky dinosaur that I forgot the name of, has emerged from Hollow Earth and started causing some trouble. Meanwhile, Godzilla is hunting him down. We follow the G-Team scrambling from point A to point B, trying to intercept the clashing titans and prevent human casualties, while also trying to take out Anguirus. As at this point, they've learned they cannot take the fight to Godzilla, or at least, the G-Team has. But one character introduced in this show isn't on the G-Team itself, but rather the research wing of Monarch. This is Dr. Genichiro Shiragami. He's been developing a new bioweapon that might be key to ending the Titan domination over Earth, and while he's kept it under wraps, as a lot of our main characters would probably be at least somewhat against complete Titan genocide, he's gotten funding from the higher-ups at Monarch. This bioweapon plan is dubbed none other than Operation Biolante. That brings us to 2035, Godzilla Biohazard. A year after Season 1 of G-Team, we get our first film of the phase, Godzilla Biohazard, follows Dr. Shiragami enacting his bioweapon plan, while Godzilla is battling another smaller titan. The G-Team managed to somehow infect Godzilla with it, a virus that's main goal is to break down his very cellular structure, eventually leading to becoming completely weak. The plan is to infect every monster with this in time, but Godzilla, being the king of the monsters, makes the perfect test subject. After managing to seemingly weaken Godzilla and get a good hit in, Godzilla begins spouting large amounts of blood, much more than he ever has, and he retreats into the ocean nearby. We then see Dr. Shiragami collecting some of the Godzilla blood. We also learn that his daughter is sick. In a change from the original Biollante film, the daughter is still alive, but had been injured gravely in a Titan attack during one of the previous films, leaving her almost completely bedridden, thus giving Genichiro a motive for why he wants to kill Godzilla. He uses the Godzilla blood he collected and attempts to make a cure for his daughter, but unknowingly mixes some of the Biollante bioweapon in during an accident. When the girl is injected, she begins the transformation into the Biollante we all know. This film will take a mix between full-on body horror and that of a tragedy, as the daughter slowly loses her mind, transforming into a giant plant monster. Throughout the film, we also cut back to Godzilla, who is clearly having adverse effects to the virus. But not the expected ones. While the gushing blood at first looked like a sign that the virus had worked, it is now beginning to look a whole lot worse. While it is indeed melting away at his very being, he is also regenerating any lost flesh in a haphazard way, revealing lots of bare flesh and an overall terrifying looking appearance for Godzilla. His blood continues to burn up from the stress, and Godzilla gets a lot more antagonistic. At first I believed to be a result of him simply being angry about the virus. Eventually it worsens into him becoming the monster humanity I'd always feared he was. As his dorsal plates glow a deep red, he unleashes his most powerful attack in the Monsterverse yet, an insanely precise Omega Beam that pierces through a human city for no reason other than pure anger and agony. Then, the worst case scenario happens. Biollante breaks loose and begins to threaten Godzilla's reign. Combine this with the awful state Godzilla is in, and an all-out war is inevitable. The two titans battle, and eventually, Biollante is put out of her misery, with Dr. Shiragami destroying all of the research that it cannot be used again, and taking his own life so that no one can use him to get at it. A hauntingly dark moment that mirrors the ending to the very first Godzilla film all the way back in 1954. The film ends with a shot of the monster that humanity has created. Godzilla roars into the sky and suddenly begins to glow red once again. Only this time he isn't attacking. He begins to grow, his bones snapping into place and his tail reaching brand new lengths. His emaciated skin giving way to an exposed skeleton with the red glow slowly turning purple. Shin Godzilla has just achieved his second form. As he returns to the ocean to cool down, he lets out a loud roar and we cut to black. So, when I said this film had a body horror mixed with tragedy, I wasn't just referring to the human who unfortunately becomes Biollante, although she definitely counts. I was also referring to Godzilla. Both of these monsters are victims of circumstance and the folly of humanity, and it will soon lead to their very extinction. 2036, Monarch G-Team, Season 2. After the events of Biohazard, Monarch and humanity as a whole are understandably on edge. Godzilla is stronger than ever and looking to destroy anything in his path. At least he hasn't gone out of his way to destroy any cities yet. All the same, Monarch must prepare, and with the Alpha Titan having disappeared, it's up to the G-Team to make sure the other Titans stay in place. The main threat this season is Rodan. He's always been tricky, but with Godzilla seemingly on vacation, Rodan seizes the opportunity to try and become the new Alpha. The G-Team throw everything they have at him, being very careful to avoid any more bioweapons, of course. But in the ending of the season, the thing that really stops him is the return of the King. Godzilla shows up in all of his Form 2 glory and beats the ever-living shit out of Rodan, almost immediately. The big bad we've been playing with all season is chump change compared to this new Godzilla, his purple Omega Beam snapping through one of his legs as he retreats. Thankfully, Rodan still has the speed advantage and is able to escape, making his way back to his volcano and quite literally re-sealing himself away out of fear. And while the G-Team is cheering at first, they soon realize that Godzilla has just turned his gaze to them. Where once Godzilla would then peacefully walk away, now he's looking for the fight. Thus, the entire finale is dedicated to a massive battle between everything that Monarch can throw at Godzilla in this brand new ultimate form. We really get to sink our teeth into this second form introduced at the ending of Biohazard, and of course, we keep his involvement in the show a secret, so when he shows up and mops the floor with our heroes, it's a total surprise. In the end, Godzilla returns to the ocean after heating up once again, but not before leveling the city. killing some major characters and leaving Monarch in tatters. Godzilla does not evolve again in this finale, but the implication that he will continue to do so remains terrifyingly present. Godzilla again completely disappears from Monarch's radar, with them not sure if he's even in the Hollow Earth, and praying that when he comes again, they can be prepared. 2037, King Kong. So by this point, it's been a minute since we've last seen Kong, but with Godzilla's disappearance, the world needs a new alpha for the Titans. Rodan tried and got clapped, and the other Titans are still causing chaos. So Monarch brings Kong out from Hollow Earth in hopes of instating him as the new alpha. We bring back Gia from the GXK films and follow Kong as he faces off against a new Titan threat that has emerged. We haven't had a fully original new Titan in a minute as of this film, and I wanted to keep that element alive in the Monsterverse, so let's have Kong go up against something big and completely new. Overall, this is going to be more focused on reinstating Kong. We can't have him chilling in Hollow Earth the whole time, and I also like the idea of having a slightly more fun and comedic film focused on Kong just becoming king of the overworld. Something new. So, here he's embroiled in the coming conflict, but by the end, Kong is king, the new alpha, and something that will no doubt attract Godzilla in time. 2037, Rodan. A project people have been clamoring for is a Rodan project, and I get it. He's my favorite monster out of the big five, and I think there is some potential. Unfortunately, I'm not so sure that it would fare that well at the box office with general audiences. It could, but it might be a bit risky. So instead, we test the waters with another spin-off show, specifically a limited one-season miniseries. And I know, ever since Marvel poisoned the proverbial well with their miniseries, basically just being stretched out films, people have been wary of these. But trust me, that's not what we're doing. This is basically just a single season show, similar to the Monarch shows by this point. 10 episodes to test the water for big monster spin-offs. This one is also fairly detached from the ongoing storyline, with it instead focused on just being a really cool Rodan prequel. Oh yeah, that word. This is a prequel, set way before any other Monsterverse project, bar maybe some comics which I haven't read. This is set during some of those early cave paintings seen in stuff like King of the Monsters, an ancient society terrorized by Rodan, until they can find some way to trick him into his volcanic prison. Talk about underdogs. Again, nothing too much to add to the current storyline, just a fun spin-off. Remember when those were commonplace? 2038, Mothra, Operation Battra. Now, while the Rodan film is a risk given he's a somewhat unknown to casuals, Mothra on the other hand might stand more of a chance. Not only has she had more Monsterverse appearances, but she also has a history of solo films that go beyond the number 1. And while those have never been too financially successful either in the past, with the Monsterverse backing, I think she could pull it off. Of course, we've got a contingency. If for some reason the Rodan series were to underperform, then we just rename this film and recenter it as none other than a Monarch G-Team film, as it will star all of the core cast from that series, with Mothra remaining the primary monster for the film, or at least on the hero side. Mothra has always been known as the more heroic monster alongside Kong, so when the legendary beast known as Titanus Battra, see what I did there, makes its appearance, it is destined that Mothra will defeat it. We can throw Kong in too to help out and bring in some more butts to seats, and it makes sense given he is currently the alpha who is to watch over and make sure no monsters are causing any chaos, which Battra is very much so doing. I'd also just like to see a team up with Kong and Mothra while Godzilla is still missing. I think it'd be neat. 2038, Monarch G-Team, Season 3, the final season. Blah. So, yeah, the final season of Monarch G-Team, with the world seemingly returning to some level of stability with Kong and Mothra keeping any rogue monsters in their place, G-Team knows it's only a matter of time until Godzilla shows up again. And sure enough, he does. Throughout the series, Shin Godzilla makes his return, and by the end of the series evolves once again into his third form, with this one being a lot more notable than just a height increase. Sprouting off of Godzilla's tail, large, roughly 10 to 20 feet humanoid titan hybrid monsters begin to appear, quickly running through cities and ravaging everything. These things are tiny compared to Godzilla, but still tower over the average human in a terrifying way. And they're going to make up the bulk of what the G-Team will be fighting throughout the series, which is going to be a lot more serialized than the past 2 seasons have been. In a time when Godzilla has gotten so large that it becomes hard to really compare his scale, these beasties help retain that. Meanwhile, the third form also sees Godzilla grow again, achieving an astounding height of about 500 feet, only 100 shy of the current largest holder for the title in Earth. His skin evolves around himself into a blackened, lumpy shape, while his neck and face become more exposed. His eyes bulge out slightly and gloss over silver, similar to Shin whenever he unleashes his attacks. By the ending of the series, Godzilla has not only returned, but has just declared war on life itself. 2039, Godzilla, all-out attack. So the world has just gone to shit, right? Most major civilizations that Godzilla has visited have crumbled, and those that haven't are simply waiting. Kong and Mothra cannot contain the chaos of the other monsters, who at this point have gone on a full rampage, similar to what we see in King of the Monsters. Meanwhile, Monarch scrambles to build a giant ark to carry what remains of humanity off into space, a la Monster Planet's opening. Despite being named after Godzilla, we actually spend a lot of time on Mothra and the G-Team. Meanwhile, we intermittently cut to Kong trying to hold back the other monsters. He hasn't had a chance to challenge Godzilla, but is clearly gearing to, which will be the setup for our next and final film in this arc. However, this film puts the ball in Mothra's court, while the G-Team try to evacuate cities and battle off the Titan-human hybrids. However, things, as always in a Part 1, end badly, with Godzilla killing Mothra. The G-Team managed to retrieve one of her eggs, but things are bleak. The world is at its end, and just when things couldn't get any worse, Godzilla evolves again. This time the changes are much more pronounced. Enormous wings, large enough to dwarf Ghidorah, sprout from Godzilla's back. He grows to a staggering 650 feet, making him the tallest incarnation, and an enormous crystalline structure forms from his back and shoulders. Shin Godzilla's fourth form, Space Godzilla. Most of the arcs that humanity has been building are destroyed, leaving only a handful, and their launch is delayed. Godzilla doesn't want humanity gone, he wants them extinct. Finally, Kong manages to arrive, setting the stage for the finale. 2040, Godzilla vs. King Kong, Shin. The final battle, the ultimate rematch. Whereas our last phase saw every monster we could cram coming into the fray, this one is a lot more subdued, only focusing on some of the key players, mainly Godzilla vs. King Kong. Meanwhile, Monarch live up to their names and manage to protect the Mothra egg, leading to another Mothra larvae being born, and at one point, Kong frees Rodan from the volcano, getting him to help out in the fight alongside himself against Godzilla. The fight is rough, and to really emphasize the stakes, Rodan will be fully killed here, along with several other background monsters, but in the end, the real Godzilla is able to peek through the Shin virus and ultimately sacrifices himself to restore balance. On the eve of his fifth form, he manages to launch himself into space and into the heart of the very sun itself, exploding and dying so that the Earth can again return to its natural state. Leaving the title of Alpha in the hands of Kong, and eventually Zuko. Mothra is reborn, and the dwindling population of humanity have a choice to make. In the end, they decide to leave on their ark, find a new homeworld, and leave the Earth to the monsters. There's nothing left for them on Earth, and the skies have become irradiated. The grounds still lurk with the remaining Titan humanoids, so Monarch gathers everyone they can. Any humans with significant ties to monsters like Kong or Mothra say goodbye, and we end on a bittersweet but hopeful note. That is, until the end credit scene begins. After Godzilla exploded into the sun itself, a single chunk of his flesh managed to survive, crashing back down to Earth eventually. It lands on a massive crater. The final scene shows a single vine curling around it as a rose grows in real time above it, as the hunk of Godzilla flesh slowly molds and becomes one with the Earth. The Godzilla theme plays, cut to black. So, that wasn't too dark, was it? The big thing I want to do with the ending here is to reflect that man cannot live with the monster and vice versa. All too often in these films, we see monsters trampling humans or humans provoking the monsters. Peace simply hasn't been an option, and I wanted this era to kind of reflect that. Godzilla goes full evil and becomes an active threat to humanity, and the human side focuses heavily on the G-Team, whose whole purpose is to take the fight to the monsters. In the end, the best thing for both is to find new horizons. Of course, this doesn't have to be the definitive end. If that scene there at the end didn't give it away, like EA when it comes to making bad business decisions, I've got one more left in me. With the way that everything ended, we're obviously going towards a more sci-fi approach. I mean, it's pretty clear I'm setting up the idea of adapting some elements from the Monster Planet trilogy. And while I know that trilogy has never been all too popular, I do think it has some great ideas in there. And I think the one flaw with those 3 movies is the execution. So if you bring some of those ideas over, I think they could be really fun and make some really cool, ideas. So that's the hope of what I could do if I do make another video like this, is I really want to take some ideas that were in bad movies and just, play with them, do some fun stuff with that. But if you want that, better like and subscribe, folks. That's right, this video only got made because the last one did so well, comparatively. And while I'm still working on plenty of other videos from FNAF to DC, wait, what? You want to see more Monsterverse? Then just keep proving it's viable, because I'm here for it. So let me know your dream pitches down below. I've seen tons of people suggesting stuff like a Gamera film or a Rodan trilogy or some crazy stuff like that, and I love hearing it. So pitch it to me, give me some juicy story deets. I want to know what you guys can cook, alright? So be sure to let me know down below how stupid my ideas are and how awesome yours are, because I guarantee if you have a cool idea, it's probably better than my stuff. So let me hear it, 'cause I love hearing that stuff. It's really cool to look through. Anyway, I've got a city full of innocent civilians to ravage ruthlessly while high on opioids, so ciao!